I didn't know my life would split into a before and an after in the soft dark of our bedroom, under curtains that barely moved, with the stale warmth of a marriage that had been holding its breath for months. "How was Ethan's?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice level the way I did when a client tried to lowball me on a renovation. Liam didn't look at me right away. He sat on the edge of the bed and tugged at his shoes like they were suddenly complicated. "Fine," he said. "We just talked about stuff, guy stuff." Ethan Chen ran the local barbershop. He hadn't spoken to Liam in 6 months, something I knew only because Ethan's wife, Raina, worked construction with me, and Raina could never keep gossip from spilling out like nails from a torn tool belt. "That's nice," I murmured. Then the words slipped out before I could stop them. "You smell different." Liam shifted away, just a fraction. A small movement, but it landed in my chest like a dropped hammer. "New cologne," he said too fast. Ethan had me try it. I turned over and studied him in the dim light. Even without the lamp, guilt has its own glow, bright, ugly, impossible to miss. His hair was messed up in a way that didn't match barbershop. His mouth, usually the first thing he kissed me with when he came home, was bare, like he'd wiped away a story. And on the side of his neck, half hidden under rushed concealer, was a bruise shaped exactly like someone's mouth. My stomach tightened, not with jealousy. No, it was colder than that. It was recognition. "Liam," I said softly, "we need to talk." "Not now, Nora," he exhaled, irritated, drunk enough to be reckless. "I'm tired." "When then?" I sat up. "Because we've been not talking for months." He laughed, one sharp sound. "You want to talk? Fine. Let's talk about how suffocating this marriage is. How I feel like I'm drowning in this town, in the same routine, with me," I finished, my voice steady. He stared at me, and the honesty that alcohol drags out finally showed its teeth. "I'm 32, he said. "I got married at 24 because I thought I was supposed to, but I never got to explore my options." Options. The word didn't just sting, it rewired the room. "What kind of options?" I asked. His eyes didn't flinch this time. "The kind that doesn't involve pretending a contractor's idea of romance is dinner at Applebee's." I reached over and clicked on the bedside lamp, and in the sudden light, I saw it clearly. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone who had already left. He just hadn't packed his bag yet. "You're seeing someone," I said. Silence. Then, like a match struck in my face, he finally whispered the name that would burn down everything I thought I knew. "Brenda Foster. My name is Nora Palmer. I'm 33 years old, and I build things for a living. Real things. Cabinets that fit tight, stair rails that don't wobble, kitchens that stop feeling like echo chambers. In a small town like Cedar Falls, people don't care about your captions or your personal brand. They care if your work holds." That's what I always loved about my job. Wood doesn't flatter you. Tile doesn't lie. If you cut a corner, it shows. If you rush, it cracks. If you don't measure twice, you pay for it later. I used to believe marriage worked the same way. I met Liam when I was 24, and I still remember how ordinary the moment was. No fireworks, no movie soundtrack, just a hardware store aisle that smelled like rubber and dust, and me standing there with a paint sample fan, trying to decide between warm linen and soft sand, like it mattered. He came up behind me and said, "If you pick warm linen, you'll hate it in a month." I turned, ready to snap, because men in Cedar Falls love telling women what they'd regret. And then I saw his smile. Not smug, just amused. Like he could see my whole argument forming and was inviting it. "And what would you pick, oh wise stranger?" I asked. "Neither," he said. "You want driftwood. It won't fight your lighting." It was such a specific opinion that I laughed. And then we started talking, the way you do when you don't mean to, but it feels easy. He was working in property management then, steady, presentable, polite. He had that small town confidence, the kind that didn't come from being special, but from being known. He asked for my number right there, near the caulk and the weather stripping, And 2 nights later, we had burgers at a booth where the vinyl seats squeaked when you shifted your weight. He listened when I talked about work, really listened. He didn't call it cute or ask when I planned to get a real job. He said, "That's impressive," like he meant it. And I remember thinking, finally, someone who doesn't need to shrink me to feel tall. We married fast by big city standards, but in Cedar Falls it was normal. We'd been together a little over a year when he proposed. He proposed with a ring he'd saved for quietly. And he did it in our half-finished living room because he said he wanted to ask me in the place we're building. I said yes, with paint on my hands. For the first few years, it really did feel like building something together. We bought our house, modest, a little creaky, but ours. I did most of the renovations myself. Liam would bring coffee, carry lumber, kiss my forehead like I was the center of his world. Our routines were simple. My early mornings, his steady schedule, takeout Fridays, grocery runs Sundays, and then, not dramatically, not in a way you could point to and say, there, that's the exact moment. It was smaller than that. A delayed text, a new passcode on his phone, Liam looking past me when I talked, like his mind had already stepped out of the room. He started dressing differently, nicer shirts, shoes he never used to care about. He started saying things like, "You wouldn't get it," when I asked about his day. And the first time he said it, I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. His friends changed too. People I didn't really know, but whose names started appearing in his stories more than mine did. He'd go out, come back smelling like beer and someone else's detergent. And when I asked where he'd been, he'd answer like I was an inconvenience. Even the town noticed. In Cedar Falls, nothing happens privately. Raina Chen, Ethan's wife, was the kind of woman who could tell you what you ate for lunch by the shape of your trash. She'd make comments while we worked on a job site together. "Liam's been out a lot," she'd say casually, like she was talking about the weather. "Hope everything's okay." And I would smile and say, "Of course," because admitting doubt felt like inviting it to stay. The worst part was Liam's family. They weren't cruel, not openly, but they had that quiet way of making you feel like you were always being evaluated, like you were an applicant, not a wife. When Liam started pulling away, they didn't ask if I was okay. They asked what I'd done. So by the time he sat on our bed and said, "I never got to explore my options," it didn't come out of nowhere. It just finally said out loud what had been building in the silence for months. And the name he whispered, Brenda Foster, made my blood go cold because everyone in Cedar Falls knew who she was. Not a woman you accidentally fall into, a choice. After Liam said her name, the room didn't explode. That was the strange part. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, just a long, suspended silence, like the moment after you hit a nail wrong and wait to see if the wood will split. "Brenda Foster," I repeated, tasting each syllable. "How long?" He didn't answer right away. He rubbed his face, dragged his hands down like he could physically wipe the moment away. "Does it matter?" That answer told me everything. "It matters to me," I said. He exhaled through his nose, irritated now, defensive. 3 months. 3 months. 3 months of 60-hour work weeks on my end. 3 months of me setting aside money for the anniversary trip he'd been too stressed to talk about. 3 months of me blaming myself for the distance because that felt easier than imagining betrayal. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, my mind did what it always did when something went wrong on a job site. It started inventorying facts. Brenda Foster wasn't just someone. She was the someone in Cedar Falls. Recently divorced, came back from Boston with a law degree, an expensive car, and a reputation that preceded her by about 3 blocks. Men talked about her like she was a prize. Women talked about her like she was a warning. And married men? They talked to her in secret. "She's exciting," Liam said, like he was explaining a design choice. "She understands me. She doesn't make me feel small." I almost laughed. The irony sat heavy in my chest. I make you feel small? I asked. You make me feel trapped, he snapped. Like this is it. Like my life's already decided. I thought about all the times I'd supported his career changes. The nights I stayed up balancing budgets. The weekends I worked so we could have a future he now claimed suffocated him. And suddenly, the little things rearranged themselves into something ugly and coherent. The new phone passcode. The sudden gym routine at 6 a.m. The way he'd stop touching me unless it was automatic, absent, like checking a box. The nights he came home smelling like a different soap. The credit card charges I hadn't questioned because Brenda's firm had clients in Portland, and Liam had started taking more work trips. None of it was dramatic on its own. Together, it was a pattern. You're not sorry, I said quietly. He looked at me, really looked this time, and something flickered, but it wasn't remorse. I didn't plan for this to happen, he said. It just did. That sentence, the universal shield of people who refuse responsibility, settled something inside me. You planned enough to lie, I replied. Enough to come home to my bed after being with her. He flinched, and that was the first crack. Over the next few days, the tension didn't ease. It fermented. Liam didn't leave. He acted like the confession itself was supposed to reset the board, like now that I knew we could renegotiate the terms of my pain. He suggested counseling. He suggested space. He suggested that maybe we had both made mistakes. And every suggestion came with the same unspoken expectation, that I would absorb it, adjust, compromise, like I always had. His family called, not to ask how I was, to ask what I was doing to push him away. His mother's voice was tight with disappointment. Men go through phases, Nora. You can't smother them. Smother. I was the one sleeping alone on the edge of the bed while he texted someone else under the covers. Raina Chen pulled me aside at work one afternoon, her voice low. You didn't hear this from me, she said, but Brenda's been bragging. Not publicly, just enough. About what? I asked, though I already knew. About how she doesn't date single men anymore, Raina said. Says the married ones are more motivated. That night, Liam came home late again. He didn't bother hiding his phone this time. And as I watched the blue glow light his face while he smiled at something she'd sent, something inside me finally shifted. Not into rage. Into clarity. He wasn't confused. He wasn't trapped. He had made a choice, over and over again. And the longer I stayed silent, the more that choice would keep costing me. The marriage wasn't breaking anymore. It was already broken. The question was how much of myself I was going to lose before I stopped pretending otherwise. The moment everything finally snapped didn't come with screaming or shattered plates. It came with a smell. I was half asleep when Liam slid into bed sometime after midnight. The mattress dipped, familiar and foreign all at once. Instinctively, I turned toward him, muscle memory from 8 years of marriage. And that's when it hit me. Not his cologne. Something sweeter, lighter, floral in a way that didn't belong to me. My eyes opened in the dark. How was your night? I asked softly. He hesitated, just long enough. Fine, he said. Worked late, grabbed drinks with friends. Friends. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing try to settle into the rhythm of sleep. My heart didn't race. It slowed, like it was preparing for something heavy. You smell different, I said again, more deliberately this time. He shifted, rolling slightly away from me. I told you, new cologne. I reached out and touched his shoulder. He tensed under my hand. That's when I sat up. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, catching the side of his face and his neck. The bruise was darker now, less carefully hidden. A purplish bloom just below his jaw. My fingers curled into the sheet. Liam, I said, and even to my own ears, my voice sounded too calm. Turn toward me. He didn't. Turn toward me, slowly, like a man complying with a police order he already knows won't end well. He did. There was no denying it now. His lipstick was gone. His hair was rumpled in a way that wasn't sleep, and the mark on his neck, the one he tried to cover earlier, looked unmistakably like someone's mouth had claimed him, not mine. "We need to talk," I said. "Not now," he muttered. "I'm exhausted." "When then?" My voice cracked for the first time. "Because you've been avoiding me for months." That did it. He sat up sharply, irritation flaring like a match. "Fine. You want to talk? Let's talk." I wrapped my arms around myself, bracing. "I feel like I'm suffocating," he said. "This town, this routine, this marriage, it's like every day is the same and I'm just disappearing." "You're disappearing because you've already left," I said. "You just keep coming back to sleep here." He scoffed. "See? That tone, that judgment, that's exactly what I mean." "What tone?" I asked. "The one where I notice my husband doesn't come home anymore?" He laughed then, not kindly, not nervously. "God, Nora," he said, "you act like this is the worst thing that could happen, like people don't grow, like they don't outgrow each other." "Outgrowing doesn't involve lying," I said, "or sneaking around." He looked at me for a long moment, and then something changed in his expression. It was the look of someone who decides there's no point pretending anymore. "I got married too young," he said. "I did what I was supposed to do. Settled down, bought a house, married a responsible woman. But I never got to explore my options." There it was again. Options. My throat tightened. "And Brenda is one of those options?" He didn't deny it. "She makes me feel alive," he said quietly. "She doesn't look at me like I'm already figured out." The words landed one by one, heavy and precise. "So what are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying maybe we made a mistake," he replied. "Maybe we both deserve better." I reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. The light was unforgiving. I really looked at him then, at the man I'd married. The man who used to bring me coffee on job sites and brag about my work to anyone who would listen. The man who now sat in my bed smelling like another woman and talking about options, like our life together was a bad investment. "You're seeing her," I said. It wasn't a question. Silence. Then, "Yes." "How long?" 3 months. 3 months. I felt it in my body then, the way shock actually feels. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a hollowing out, like someone had scooped something essential from my chest. "While I was working overtime," I said slowly. "While I was saving for our anniversary trip. While I was trying to figure out how to make you happy again." He didn't meet my eyes. "I want you to leave," I said. His head snapped up. "What?" "I want you to pack a bag," I repeated, "and leave. Tonight." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You can't be serious." I've never been more serious about anything in my life. "Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at him, this man who had just told me our marriage was a mistake. "Call Brenda," I said. "I'm sure she has room." He started shouting then, about how unreasonable I was, how I was overreacting, how this exact reaction was why he'd been unhappy. While he threw clothes into a suitcase, muttering under his breath, something inside me hardened. If he wanted to explore his options, fine. But he was about to learn that choices don't just come with excitement. They come with consequences. 20 minutes later, the door closed behind him, and I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the empty space he'd left, already planning my next move. The house didn't feel quiet after Liam left. It felt hollow, like sound had nowhere to land. I stayed on the edge of the bed long after the door closed, my hands flat against the mattress where his weight had been. The sheets were still warm, still smelled faintly like him, like her. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, not because I was numb, but because my body hadn't caught up to the reality yet. Shock isn't loud. Shock is administrative. I stood, walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water I didn't drink, and sat at the table like I was waiting for instructions. My brain started filing things away automatically. Keys still on the hook, lights still on in the hallway, his coffee mug in the sink like he might come back for it. At some point, I realized my hands were shaking. "Breathe," I told myself. "Just breathe." I went to the window and looked out at the street. Same houses, same quiet. Mrs. Patterson's porch light still on. A car passed, tires humming softly on asphalt. The world hadn't noticed my marriage implode, and something about that felt insulting. Around 2 a.m, I finally sat down on the couch and let my thoughts come in waves instead of fragments. Had I missed something obvious? I replayed conversations from the past year, slowing them down, rewinding. The times he'd brushed me off, the jokes that landed a little too sharp, the way he'd stopped asking about my day, like my life had become background noise. I asked myself the question women always ask first, no matter how unfair it is. Was it my fault? Had I worked too much? Been too independent? Too tired? Too predictable? Then another thought followed, quieter but steadier. Even if I had been, did that justify this? Liam hadn't come to me. He hadn't said he was unhappy. He hadn't asked for counseling until after he was already sleeping with someone else. He hadn't given me a chance to respond. He'd given himself permission to escape. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. Just before dawn, my phone buzzed. A text. Liam, we need to talk. This doesn't have to be so dramatic. I stared at the screen, my chest tight. I typed back slowly, deliberately. Me. You wanted options. Explore them. The reply came immediately. Liam, you're being childish. It's not what you think. I laughed once, short and humorless. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I called in sick. The foreman's surprise was audible. You okay, Nora? Family emergency, I said, which wasn't a lie. Once the house was fully awake with daylight, I moved again. Not frantically, not emotionally, methodically. I started with the obvious, Liam's social media. His Facebook had changed in subtle ways. More new beginnings quotes, more likes from people I didn't recognize. Brenda Foster's name popped up more than once, never tagged together, never explicit, careful, calculated. Instagram was worse. Restaurants we'd never been to. Wine bars I'd never heard him mention. Art galleries he used to mock as pretentious. And in every photo, there was a version of him I didn't recognize. Relaxed, curated, like he was auditioning for a different life. But curiosity didn't turn into clarity until I logged into our phone account. 8 years. I'd paid the bill every month without thinking about it, which meant I had access. When the call logs loaded, my stomach dropped. One number dominated the screen. Hundreds of texts, hours of calls, late at night, early morning, during work hours, gaps that lined up perfectly with his gym time and meetings. I copied everything, printed it, spread it across the kitchen table like evidence in a case file. In a way, that's exactly what it was. Not just proof of an affair, proof of planning. At 10 that morning, my phone rang again. Raina Chen. Hey, she said carefully. You okay? Liam and I are separating, I replied. Silence. Then a soft curse. I'm so sorry. He's been seeing Brenda Foster, I added. Her exhale was sharp. That tracks. I closed my eyes. Tell me what you know. There was a pause. Then, only that you're not the first. That sentence landed differently than everything else. Not rage, not despair. Understanding. After the call ended, I sat back and stared at the papers in front of me. I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not anger, not sadness. Focus. Liam thought confessing was the hard part. He thought honesty was the cost of admission to a softer exit. He didn't realize that for me, honesty was just the beginning. If he wanted to rewrite our story without me, fine. But I was done being the passive character in my own life. And whatever came next, I wasn't going to meet it unprepared. Not this time. By the afternoon, the shock had burned off completely. What remained was something sharper, clearer. I didn't pace the house or scream into pillows. I cleaned. Not because the house was dirty, but because order helps me think. Dishes washed, counters wiped, tools put back where they belonged. By the time the sun slid lower, my kitchen looked like a model home, and my dining table looked like a crime scene. Printed phone records, bank statements, credit card summaries. Patterns don't lie. And Liam had been sloppy. The first thing that chilled me wasn't Brenda. It was money. I'd always handled our finances loosely but responsibly. We both earned. We both contributed. I trusted him not because he'd earned blind faith, but because we'd built years of reliability together, or so I thought. I opened our joint savings account and started scrolling. Small transfers. Not enough to trigger alarms. Not enough to feel dramatic. But consistent, strategic. Amounts that disappeared the way termites eat wood. Quietly, patiently, destructively. I called the bank. "Hi," I said calmly. "I need to review recent transfers from my joint account." The woman on the line hesitated. "Are you authorized?" "I'm the primary account holder," I replied. That ended the conversation. She walked me through the transactions, confirmed dates, confirmed destinations, one new account, sole ownership, Liam's name, not Brenda's, which meant he'd planned this longer than he admitted. I hung up and sat very still. So while he'd been telling me he felt trapped, he'd been quietly building himself a parachute. That night, his mother called. I almost didn't answer, but avoidance had cost me enough already. "Nora," she said, her voice tight with concern that felt performative. "Liam told us you threw him out." "I asked him to leave," I corrected, after he admitted to an affair. A pause, then, "Well, marriages have ups and downs. He's been sleeping with another woman for 3 months." Another pause, longer this time. "You work a lot," she said carefully. "Men need attention too." There it was. The familiar gendered calculus. "So do women," I replied evenly. "But most of us don't steal money and lie to get it." Her inhale was sharp. "There's no need to exaggerate." "I'm not," I said. "I have the records." Silence. Then, "Liam says you're being vindictive." I smiled faintly. "Liam says a lot of things." After the call ended, I didn't feel guilty. I felt validated, because the pattern was clear now. Not just his betrayal, but the system around him that had always cushioned his choices. Friends, too. One text from a mutual acquaintance landed that evening. "He didn't mean to hurt you. This is just one of those things. One of those things. Like bad weather. Like a broken appliance. Not like months of deception and calculated exits." I stopped responding altogether. Instead, I called a lawyer. Actually, I called 3. The first was sympathetic but vague. The second asked too many questions about reconciliation. The third listened without interrupting while I laid everything out. Affair, finances, timeline. When I finished, she said 6 words that made my shoulders drop for the first time in days. Let's make sure this is documented. Her name was Margaret Walsh, mid-50s, calm, precise, recently divorced herself. She didn't soften reality or dramatize it. She just explained it. Forensic accounting, she said. Asset tracing. Documentation of infidelity. We don't need revenge. We need leverage. "How much is this going to cost?" I asked. "More than you want," she replied. "Less than what you'll lose if you don't." I hired her on the spot. That night, Liam texted again. "Liam, this is getting out of hand. We can handle this privately." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Margaret. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Good. Let him keep talking." The escalation didn't come from yelling or threats. It came from exposure, from facts lining up, from doors quietly closing where Liam thought they'd stay open. 2 days later, Raina showed up at my house with a folder under her arm. "I shouldn't be involved," she said, setting it down anyway. "But I can't watch you get gaslit." Inside were things I hadn't asked for, but needed. Photos, dates, names, nothing illegal, nothing dramatic. Just confirmation that Brenda Foster wasn't new to this, and that Liam wasn't special. "He's not her first married man," Raina said quietly. "Just the one dumb enough to think he was different." I thanked her and closed the door gently behind her. That night, alone in my bed for the 4th time, I realized something important. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about erasure. Liam had rewritten our marriage in his head to justify his escape. He turned me into an obstacle, a burden, a footnote. And the more he talked, to his family, his friends, his lawyer, the clearer it became. He wasn't remorseful. He was annoyed. Annoyed that consequences existed. That was the moment I stopped hoping he'd come to his senses. Because people who regret don't minimize. They don't shift blame. They don't quietly move money and call it self-preservation. I didn't need to destroy him. I just needed to stop protecting him from the truth. And the truth, once it starts moving, has a way of picking up speed all on its own. By the end of the week, Margaret called me with an update. "We found more," she said, "and it changes things." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "Good," I replied, "because I'm done pretending this is small." For the first time since Liam left, I didn't feel like I was reacting. I felt like I was steering. And whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. This story was no longer happening to me. I was actively writing the next chapter. The lowest point didn't come with a scream. It arrived quietly on a Tuesday night, when the house felt too big for one person and too empty for forgiveness. I had just finished a 12-hour day, physical work, the kind that usually grounds me. My hands ached, my shoulders burned. Normally, exhaustion brought sleep. That night, it brought silence. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, staring at the bed I'd shared with Liam for 8 years. I hadn't changed the sheets yet. Part of me told myself it was practical. Why rush? Another part knew the truth. If I changed them, I'd have to admit he wasn't coming back. I sat on the edge of the mattress and pressed my palms into my eyes, hard enough to see sparks. This was the first time I cried. Not the sharp, dramatic kind. The kind that leaks out slowly, like a pipe you didn't know was cracked until the floor starts to warp. I thought about the early years, the way he used to look at me like I was something he was proud to stand beside. The nights we lay awake, planning a future that felt solid then. Children we might have, trips we'd take once things settled down. I'd built my life around a partnership that turned out to be conditional. Conditional on my usefulness. Conditional on my silence. Conditional on my willingness to shrink. The phone buzzed beside me. A message from Liam. "Liam, you didn't have to get lawyers involved. You're turning everyone against me." Against him. Not because of him. My throat tightened. I typed, deleted, typed again. "Me. I didn't turn anyone against you. I stopped covering for you." The reply came slower this time. "Liam, you're acting like a victim." That word landed like a blade. Victim. As if betrayal was a personality flaw. As if trust was something naive I should have known better than to offer. I set the phone face down and lay back, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything finally press down at once. This was it. This was the point of no return. Not because of lawyers or evidence or money, but because the man I married no longer recognized my pain as valid. And worse, he resented it. Around midnight, the doubt crept in. The quiet, corrosive kind. What if this ruins me? What if I lose friends, work, reputation? Cedar Falls was small. Stories stuck. Women were labeled difficult, cold, vindictive. What if, in protecting myself, I became the villain? I rolled onto my side and hugged a pillow to my chest, breathing through the ache. For the first time since this started, I questioned myself. Not my decisions, but my endurance. Did I have the energy to see this through? To be misunderstood? To be alone? The house answered with silence. And in that silence, another memory surfaced. One I hadn't thought about in years. My father, standing in our garage when I was 16, teaching me how to measure twice before cutting once. I'd messed it up, ruined a board, and thrown the saw down in frustration. He'd said calmly, "Fixing mistakes takes more strength than pretending they didn't happen." At the time, I thought he was talking about carpentry. Now, lying in the dark, I understood he'd been talking about life. I didn't want this divorce. I didn't want to be alone. But I also didn't want to live the rest of my life negotiating my worth with someone who treated loyalty like a temporary inconvenience. The next morning, the darkness followed me into daylight. Coffee tasted like nothing. Music felt intrusive. I moved through the day like I was underwater. Everything slowed, muffled, heavy. Margaret called around noon. "You okay?" she asked. Not as a lawyer, but as a woman who recognized the sound of someone holding it together with muscle memory alone. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's normal," she said. "This is the part where it hurts the most." "Why?" I asked. The worst already happened. No, she replied gently. The worst is realizing the person you loved doesn't miss you the way you miss them. I swallowed hard. But this is also the part, she continued, where people either fold or find their footing. After we hung up, I sat in my truck for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. I let myself feel it. The grief, the anger, the humiliation. And then, underneath all of it, something steadier emerged. Resolve. I didn't need to be cruel. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop abandoning myself. That night, I changed the sheets, washed them, folded them, put them away. And as I lay down in a bed that finally smelled like me, I understood something important. This pain wasn't a sign I was losing. It was proof I'd stopped lying to survive. And whatever came next, no matter how hard, it would be built on truth. For the first time in weeks, I slept. Not well, but enough. Enough to be ready for what was coming. The shift didn't come from anger. It came from information. Margaret called on a Thursday morning, her voice sharper than usual, focused, energized. We finished the deeper review, she said, and you need to hear this sitting down. I closed the door to my truck and leaned back against the seat. Tell me. There was a brief pause. Then, Liam didn't just start planning his exit 3 months ago. My grip tightened on the phone. How long? I asked. Closer to 6. 6 months. Half a year of shared dinners, shared plans, shared bed, while he quietly dismantled the life we'd built. Margaret continued, her tone clinical. He opened a secondary account under his name only. He's been transferring funds in small amounts. He's also used joint funds to cover expenses that don't align with household needs. Brenda, I said. Yes, Margaret replied. Trips, meals, gifts. Not massive individually, but the pattern is clear. I stared at the dashboard, my reflection faint in the glass. So this wasn't panic, I murmured. This was strategy. That's exactly how a judge will see it, she said. Which brings me to the next part. I held my breath. He's been presenting himself as financially dependent, Margaret went on. But based on the records, he's been earning more than he disclosed. And there's evidence he was positioning himself to request support. Support. From me. After cheating on me. After draining our savings. Something in my chest unlocked. Not rage, not despair. Certainty. I want to proceed, I said. Fully. Margaret exhaled, satisfied. Good. Because we now have leverage. That afternoon, I met her in person for the first time since everything escalated. Her office was quiet, neutral. No intimidation, no warmth, just clarity. She slid a folder across the desk. This is what changes the power dynamic, she said. Inside were timelines, charts, clean lines connecting actions to outcomes, not accusations. Proof. He thought you'd crumble, Margaret said calmly. Thought you'd want peace more than fairness, that you'd accept a clean break and let him walk away intact. I thought about Liam's texts, his insistence that I was making things difficult. No, I said quietly. He thought I wouldn't look too closely. Margaret smiled, not kindly, not cruelly. Exactly. That evening, I got the call I'd been expecting. Liam. I didn't answer at first. I let it ring. Then, after the third attempt, I picked up. What do you want? I asked. His voice was strained, tired, defensive. My lawyer says you're asking for a full forensic review, he said. That's unnecessary. I disagree. You're trying to ruin me, he snapped. I closed my eyes, steady. No, I said. I'm letting your choices speak for themselves. You're overreacting, he said. This could have been simple. Simple for who? I asked. For you? Silence. Then quieter. I never meant for this to get so ugly. That's the problem, I replied. You never meant for me to see it clearly. He exhaled sharply. What do you want, Nora? I thought about that. What I wanted now, not before, not in grief or hope, but standing in truth. I want accountability, I said. I want transparency. And I want to walk away knowing I didn't trade my dignity for convenience. He scoffed. You always have to make everything a moral crusade. No, I corrected. I just stopped letting you define reality." He hung up. And instead of shaking, instead of collapsing, I felt lighter, not because it was over, but because the fog had lifted. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with the folder Margaret had given me spread out in front of me. I didn't feel powerful in a dramatic way. I felt grounded, like my feet were finally on solid ground again. Liam hadn't taken my strength. He'd mistaken my patience for weakness. And now the balance had shifted, not because I raised my voice or demanded justice, but because I refused to keep carrying his lies. The turning point wasn't the evidence. It wasn't the lawyer. It was the moment I realized I didn't need him to understand my pain. I just needed to stop protecting him from the consequences of his actions. For the first time since this began, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was choosing my next step, and that made all the difference. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came in waves, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. Margaret filed the full motion the following Monday. Asset disclosure, financial tracing, temporary orders, everything neat, documented, unemotional. The kind of paperwork that doesn't shout, but lands. By Wednesday, Liam felt it. He showed up at the house unannounced, knocking like he still belonged there. I didn't open the door right away. I watched him through the front window, his shoulders tense, his jaw set, that familiar impatience curling at the edges. When I finally opened it, I didn't invite him in. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up his phone. "My accounts are frozen." "Yes," I said calmly. "That happens when there's evidence of asset dissipation." "You can't do this," he snapped. "I can't even pay my credit card." I met his eyes. "You should have thought about that before you started moving money behind my back." His anger faltered. Not disappeared, but cracked. "This is vindictive," he said. "No," I replied. "This is procedural." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the language anymore. Because he didn't. This wasn't the emotional battlefield he knew how to manipulate. This was structure, rules, systems. The next call came from his sister, then his mother. Their tone had changed. No accusations this time, just urgency. "Nora," his mother said tightly, "this is getting out of hand. Liam's struggling." I almost laughed. "He wasn't struggling when he was planning his exit," I said, "or when he was spending joint funds on someone else." "You don't have to destroy him," she insisted. "I'm not," I said evenly. I stopped saving him. By the end of the week, word had spread. Cedar Falls always knew. People didn't ask me directly. Small towns prefer indirect confirmation. But the shift was obvious. Conversations cut short when Liam entered a room. Invitations dried up. Sympathy that used to lean toward him slowly recalibrated when facts replaced rumors. Brenda Foster disappeared from the picture faster than I expected. Not dramatically. Not with a scene, just absence. Her name stopped coming up. Her car stopped appearing where Liam stayed. The excitement evaporated the moment money became complicated and attention turned unflattering. Raina confirmed it quietly one afternoon on a job site. "She doesn't like messes," she said, "and she definitely doesn't like consequences." I nodded. I wasn't surprised. The irony was sharp, but clean. Brenda had been one of Liam's options, and she exercised hers the second things stopped being fun. Liam called that night. He sounded different. Not angry, tired. "I can't do this," he said. "I'm drowning." I leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes closed. "You told me I was suffocating you," I said softly. "Funny how that works." There was a long silence. "I made a mistake," he finally said. I waited. Not for an apology, for ownership. "What do you want from me?" he asked instead. "I want the truth on record," I replied. "I want financial restitution, and I want this marriage to end without me carrying your lies into the future." "I don't have anything left," he said bitterly. "That's not true," I said. "You still have your choices. You just don't like the outcome." The settlement negotiations were brief after that. Once the evidence was laid out, timelines, transfers, intent, there wasn't much room left for denial. Margaret pushed hard, not cruelly, but relentlessly, and Liam folded. He agreed to return the misappropriated funds over time. He walked away from claims he'd once assumed were automatic. He didn't contest the house, or the business assets, or the equipment I'd built my livelihood on. When he signed, his hand shook. I didn't feel triumph. I felt finality. By the time the papers were submitted, Cedar Falls had moved on to its next quiet drama. That's how towns like this work. They absorb scandals, metabolize them, and file them away under remember when? Liam left town shortly after. No announcement. No goodbye tour. Just gone. And the strange thing was, once he was, the house felt calmer. Not lonelier, just honest. No tension humming in the walls. No unspoken resentment in shared spaces. Just me. My work. My breath. The fallout didn't look like revenge. It looked like alignment. People who'd believed him stopped calling. People who doubted me started meeting my eyes again. Business stayed steady. Some clients even stayed longer, as if loyalty mattered more once they saw how I handled being wronged. And Liam? He faded into the background of a life he'd once tried to escape without paying the cost. I didn't chase him. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth had done what it always does when given time and structure. It settled where it belonged, and I walked away. Not loudly, not triumphantly, but intact. For the first time in a long while, that felt like everything. The divorce was finalized on a gray Thursday morning. I didn't go to the courthouse. Margaret handled it, signed documents, quiet signatures, procedural endings that didn't need witnesses. By the time I finished installing a set of custom shelves for a retired couple on Maple Street, my phone buzzed once. Margaret, it's done. I stood there for a moment, drill still in my hand, and waited for something dramatic to happen inside me. Relief, grief, triumph. Instead, what I felt was stillness. That night, I sat alone on my front steps as the sun dipped behind the trees lining our street. Mrs. Patterson watered her garden like she always did. A couple of kids rode past on bikes, laughing too loudly. Life continued, stubborn and indifferent. The house behind me was mine now. Not because I'd won, but because I'd refused to give it away to someone who treated loyalty like a temporary inconvenience. Liam had wanted freedom. He got it. He'd wanted options. He explored them. And those options led him exactly where choices without accountability always do. Nowhere solid enough to stand. I didn't rebuild my life overnight. There was no montage of instant happiness. Some evenings were quiet in a way that still stung. Some habits took time to unlearn, reaching for a second mug in the morning, turning to comment on a show no one else was watching. But something fundamental had changed. I no longer questioned my worth. I no longer negotiated my reality to keep someone comfortable. I no longer mistook endurance for love. Instead, I focused on what I could build, because building was what I knew how to do. I renovated the kitchen the way I'd always planned, finished the basement, took jobs I'd turned down before because I was afraid of being too busy for a marriage that, in hindsight, had already checked out. And slowly, without forcing it, my life filled in around me. Not with noise, with substance. Here's the lesson I learned, the one I wish someone had told me sooner. Betrayal doesn't start with cheating. It starts when someone decides your trust is something they can spend. And strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to humiliate or destroy. Sometimes strength looks like clarity, like paperwork, like boundaries that don't bend just to keep the peace. I didn't get revenge. I got my life back. And that turned out to be more than enough.